Good evening, I'm Faye Kwan. U.S.China trade talks stretch into the second day, and Trump administration deploys Marines as tensions rise over Los Angeles protests. That's coming up on AWANI International. Officials from the U.S. and China are meeting in London for a second day of high-level trade talks. The gathering of key figures from the world's two biggest economies began yesterday, following an earlier round of talks in Geneva last month. Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng is leading Beijing's delegation, alongside Commerce Minister Wang Wentao and China's International Trade Representative Li Chenggang. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and Trade Representative Jamieson Greer are part of the U.S. team. The talks are being held at London's historic Lancaster House, run by the UK Foreign Office. It comes after Washington accused Beijing of violating their Geneva deal to de-escalate high tariffs. A key point of contention was China's shipment of rare earths, crucial to goods including electric vehicle batteries. The issue was also raised last week in U.S. President Donald Trump's first call with Chinese President Xi Jinping since his return to the White House. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has deployed around 700 Marines to Los Angeles as demonstrations against immigration raids enter their fourth day. They are joining roughly 300 National Guard members already stationed in the city to control protests against immigration raids. The deployment marks a rare use of military force to support a police operation and comes at the objection of state and local leaders. California Governor Gavin Newsom vows further legal action after already suing the Trump administration for deploying National Guard troops to Los Angeles without his authorization. On the ground, protesters and members of the media have reported being targeted with rubber bullets, stun grenades and other non-lethal weapons. Among them was an Australian television reporter who was struck by a rubber bullet while covering the unrest. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has condemned the incident, saying his government has formally raised the matter with the Trump administration, though he offered no further details. Meanwhile, U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem pledged to carry out even more operations to round up suspected immigration violators, extended a crackdown that provoked the protests. Meanwhile, the United Nations has urged joint efforts to prevent the escalation of militarisation in Los Angeles, following U.S. President Donald Trump's deployment of National Guard troops to the region. Deputy spokesperson for UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, Farhan Haq, emphasizes the importance of joint efforts of local, state and federal authorities to de-escalate the unrest there.
We certainly hope that all parties on the ground will de-escalate the situation. We do not want to see any further militarization of this situation, and we encourage the parties at the local, state, and federal levels to work to do that.
We'll be back with more after the break. Stay tuned.
Kelimomo datang lagi? Mungkin shampoo anda tidak 100%. Mari kita lihat. Gunalah Head & Shoulders menghilangkan kelimomo sehingga 100%, membasmi kegagalan, melindungi kulit kepala sehingga 48 jam supaya kelimomo dan kegagalan tidak datang lagi. Head & Shoulders.
Kini anda boleh stream pelbagai rancangan Korea terbaru di Prime Video dengan Astro tanpa charge tambahan selama 2 bulan.
Oh my God. 우린 영웅이었다. 도망갈 수 있으면 가봐.
K-moment yang membuat kita jatuh cinta.
내 신랑이 헤어져.
Segala K-magic ada di sini. Hanya aktifkan pada Astro Box terbaru anda dan stream selama 2 bulan tanpa charge tambahan. Prime Video, terbaik dengan Astro.
Welcome back. Now, continuing our discussion on adopting a single currency for ASEAN, we catch up with Dr. Uma Murthy, lecturer at the Faculty of Business and Law at Taylor's University, on the key benefits as well as challenges to overcome in order to make the idea a reality.
So the key advantage is that by adopting ASEAN single currency, it's definitely going to reduce transaction costs, investment, and also tourism costs. And also that will eliminate exchange rate volatility, which is currently affecting small ASEAN economies. And other advantage, if you look at it, it will strengthen the ASEAN identity and making a global influence as a unifying economy bloc. And it's also, if you look at it, we can able to develop price transparency, and have a more efficient capital flow.
Uma also highlighted the challenges in implementing a single currency for ASEAN with member states of different strengths and capacity.
Country like Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, they are more advanced than Laos, Myanmar, and Cambodia. So we have an issue of GDP per capita, infrastructure quality. So to understand a single ASEAN currency, that works best when the economy are similar in terms of productivity, inflation, labor mobility, and also institutional strengthness. So what ASEAN can do to overcome these challenges is by invest in infrastructure, education, connectivity in a country like Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, increase their intra-ASEAN trade, investment, skill sharing, and also create a funding program for lagging economy through ASEAN Development Fund. So we have issue with the debt to GDP ratio because ASEAN countries have a different GDP to debt ratio. Likewise, if you look at it, Malaysia, we have like 66%, and whereas if you look at Brunei, they are debt free. So without proper coordination, single currency would be destabilized, and this is what we have witnessed when Greece nearly destabilized the Eurozone in 2010. So we have to learn from the past experience. So what ASEAN can do is that ASEAN can set a common fiscal rules, like for example, like set a budget deficit not exceeding 3% of the GDP, agree on the debt ceiling, strengthening national audit institution, financial transparency, establish independent oversight to monitor the compliance.
Meanwhile, all U.S. missions abroad and consular sections have been directed to resume processing student and exchange visitor visas for Harvard University. In a diplomatic cable sent last Friday, the U.S. State Department says this move complies with a temporary restraining order issued by a federal judge last week.
The new directive replaces an earlier order from that same week, which had instructed posts to deny visas to students and researchers headed to Harvard. The cable, signed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, maintained that all other student visa policies remain in effect. This includes enhanced social media screening and reviews of applicants' online presence. The temporary order granted to Harvard last Thursday blocked President Trump's proclamation to suspend the entry of foreign nationals associated with the university, pending further litigation of the matter. The president had cited national security concerns and Harvard's alleged failure to address anti-Semitism on campus.
In other news, U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has dismissed all 17 members of a key committee that issues official government recommendations on immunizations. He claims that conflicts of interest on the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices have undermined public trust in vaccines.
A vocal vaccine skeptic, Kennedy said the move was necessary to ensure that the American people receive the safest vaccines possible. He also stated that without these dismissals, Trump would have been unable to appoint a majority to the panel until 2028. 8 of the 17 vaccine experts had been appointed in January 2025, in the last days of President Biden's term. Most of the members are practicing doctors and experts affiliated with leading university hospitals. The panel is scheduled to meet on June 25th to vote on recommendations for vaccines against COVID-19, influenza, and other illnesses. This is the most sweeping move yet in a series of actions by Kennedy to overhaul U.S. regulation of vaccines, food, and medicine. Following the announcement, shares of vaccine makers Moderna and US-listed BioNTech fell more than 1%, while Pfizer dropped slightly in extended trading on Monday.
Chinese President Xi Jinping urged South Korea's newly elected President Lee Jae-myung to work with Beijing to defend multilateralism and free trade. In a phone call, Xi called for both countries to elevate their strategic cooperative partnership to a new level.
Xi stressed that strong bilateral cooperation is key to ensuring the stability and efficiency of the global and regional industrial supply chains. Lee, South Korea's new centre-left leader, secured a landslide victory in last week's snap elections that were triggered by his predecessor Yoon Suk-yeol's attempt to declare martial law. Under Yoon, relations with China deteriorated as he aligned more closely with the US and sought warmer ties with Japan. But on the campaign trail, Lee had signaled his intent to improve relations with Beijing and sparked concern by stating that a future conflict between China and Taiwan would not be South Korea's concern.
Chinese exports to major industrial hubs in Southeast Asia surged by double-digit percentages in the first 5 months of the year. This is as Beijing looks to tap into growing consumer markets, support offshore manufacturing investments, and offset losses from US tariffs.
According to official data released on Monday, exports to Thailand rose 20.9% between January and May. Shipments to Vietnam climbed 18.8%, while exports to Indonesia grew by 16.8%. In comparison, China's overall global export growth stood at just 6% over the same period. Thailand and Vietnam in particular have become critical links in regional supply chains, home to Chinese-backed factories that produce goods like cars, smartphones, and electronics for re-export.
Greta Thunberg and other activists who attempted to deliver aid to Gaza by sea have been deported from Israel after their vessel was intercepted by the military. The Israeli Foreign Ministry says passengers of the boat arrived at Ben Gurion Airport to leave Israel and return to their home countries. 22-year-old Thunberg departed for France and is expected to return to Sweden shortly. 3 other activists on board the vessel also agreed to immediate repatriation, while 8 other crew members were contesting their deportation order and would be held in a detention center ahead of a court hearing. It is currently unclear when the hearing would take place. The Madeleine from the Freedom Flotilla Coalition set sail from Sicily 1 week ago, carrying aid for Palestinians, including rice and baby formula. However, it was seized by Israeli naval forces about 200 kilometers off the Gaza coast early on Monday. The report wraps up AWANI International. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies, and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more, and be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. That's all for now. I'm Faye Kwan. Thank you for watching and good night.